In this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about some of the big contracts that were signed this offseason. Yes, these contracts used to be all about money, but now it's more about the length and term of the contract. Let's talk about some of those contracts next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, and I want to thank you for making this your first listen or view of the day. Yes, this podcast is also available in video form, so head on over to YouTube and check it out. And when you're on YouTube, make sure and hit that subscribe button. And if you like the videos, hit the thumbs up button. It really helps grow the channel. My name is Dan Holney. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So in this edition, that is what we are going to talk about. These long contracts. It seems like these big name stars and just players in general, they're not just looking for a payday. They want the security of playing on one team for a long time. And that's what they're looking for. If you want to take a look around hockey or even a little bit closer to home, Juan Soto, that's what he was looking for. His most recent deal that he wanted to get was for 15 years. So it seems like things are getting crazier and crazier in sports. And I mean, hey, if you can get it, if you can get that money, if you can get that kind of term, then I say more power to you. So in this article on the Bleacher Report, they're saying the NHL offseason is in full swing. And when we look back on the summer of 2022, we'll likely look at this as a summer of the long-term contract. In recent years, we've seen teams shy away from free agent mega deals because it's not always smart business. A 7-year deal handed out to a 30-year-old means paying for a decline on the back end. It can also complicate the salary cap in the later years, preventing younger players from getting their due as restricted free agents and forcing teams to offload players they wouldn't otherwise. However, there comes a time when teams need to go for it, and that means signing a pricey free agent to a multi-year contract, managing the cap. Currently, teams are also contending with a relatively flat salary cap, and only minimal relief is expected in the years to come. So there was some incentive to lock up elite players for the foreseeable future. In this particular exercise, we'll say that a long-term contract is at least 4 years. The following are 10 of the noteworthy and influential deals, and we'll examine why in order to hand out the grades. And I'm going to go over some of the bigger ones that are out there. And, the biggest one for me out there, just kind of taking a look at, there's some guys that signed some huge deals out there. Some of them that also signed them for the Washington Capitals. We'll talk about that later in the show. But the biggest fish for me was the Johnny Gaudreau deal, from him going from the Calgary Flames to the Columbus Blue Jackets. And it was one of those kind of deals that was a little bit crazy that I talked about in one of the previous podcasts where they said, he wants to go back to the New Jersey area because that is where he is from. And on the NHL Network, on the start of free agency, they were all talking about, is he going to New Jersey? Is he going to go to the Islanders and back and forth? And then all of a sudden he drops a bomb and says, I'm going to the Columbus Blue Jackets. And in his presser, he said, I just like Columbus. I like the Columbus area. And, truth be told, I've never been to Columbus before, but it just seems a little bit odd. And if you look geographically speaking, if he in fact wanted to go closer to home, it really doesn't seem like Columbus, Ohio is close. It's closer than Calgary is for sure, but it's just an interesting move. Johnny Gaudreau signed a 7-year deal, $68.25 million, 9.75 AAV. The winger provided hockey the shock of the year when left money on the table with a team that drafted him and turned around and turned down an offer the team that calls his state home to sign with the rebuilding Blue Jackets. No one saw this move coming. The Calgary Flames had Stanley Cup aspirations the last seasons, with Gaudreau leading the way, and Columbus has never been a premier destination in the NHL. Gaudreau clearly saw otherwise and could be the player to change the narrative. The top free agents of 2022 class is an elite winger and perennial point per game producer. He's speedy and drives play. He elevates his line mates. He's so dynamic that he can single-handedly change a team. The deal was crucial because of where he went. The location was a driving factor for him and his wife, Meredith. It was also important for him to be in the Metro Division, where he isn't quite as far from home as Southern New Jersey. Again, these people are not friends of geography, and to have some control over the situation. And I know he's a wealthy man, and I'm sure he's probably thinking to himself, and I'm never going to be in a position where I make that kind of money. But I suppose in his case, he's got private jets and can just go back and forth from home if that's what he so chooses to do. But it all just seems a bit curious to me. It seemed like money was a motivating factor, but again, I think that he wanted out of Calgary. Like they talked about in that little piece there, they said that he left money on the table and left Calgary to go to the Blue Jackets. Kind of an unproven commodity. I guess it remains to be seen how that team will do this next year. There are some bigger players on that team, but it's a team in transition. And like I talked about before, one player cannot make that team. If they have poor goaltending or poor defense, or they don't get any other scoring, then it's really not going to matter if they have Johnny Gaudreau on their team. But I do think that, of course, they're probably going to be a lot better. And from one Blue Jacket to the other, we're going to talk about Patrik Laine extension with the Columbus Blue Jackets. And he's one of those players that, you hear a lot about, but he isn't in like that upper echelon of conversation. Sometimes you hear about the biggest, the most elite, your Nazem Kadri, you hear about Johnny Gaudreau, but oftentimes you don't hear about him. And I'm not really quite sure why that is. Laine seems to have a pretty good goal scoring touch, a bit of an odd man, if you will, but I think that, he's going to help try to help that Columbus Blue Jackets team make their big push for the Stanley Cup. So he signed an extension for 4 years, $34.8 million. It was unclear whether or not the Blue Jackets would be able to re-sign another high-scoring winger in Laine when Gaudreau came aboard. General manager Jarmo Kekalainen still has some work to do to get under the salary cap by opening night, but two elite scorers like Gaudreau and Laine have the potential to make Columbus one of the most dangerous teams in the Metro. Laine was traded to the Blue Jackets in another blockbuster move in 2021 and struggled his first season in Columbus. That was the Tortorella years. So, I mean, you really can gauge that. However, he returned to his old form in 2022, averaging more than a point per game for the first time in his career. He likely would have produced more than the 26 goals and 30 assists had he played in more than 56 games, but he took time away after the death of his father and missed some time with two injuries. Laine is still only 24 years old and has his AAV, could be a bargain in a few years. It's also not so high that the club won't be able to get out from underneath it. And I think that, if you're going to build this team, I think that it would only make sense for Columbus to have Gaudreau and to have Laine. So I think on the part of their GM, that was a wise move to try to assemble a pretty good team, because if they're going to make a push, they're going to need some supporting cast around there. They're not just going to be able to do it with one player alone. All right, so after the break here, we are going to continue to talk about some of these big deals that were signed in the offseason, not just about money, but about term. We'll talk about those next. If you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs yet, you are depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. And guess what? There's a new flavor, ready, delicious, indulgent cookie dough covered in chocolate. That's right, Built has done it again. Let me introduce you to a new flavor. Cookie dough chunk puffs have a light and chewy texture, real cookie dough chunks, and of course, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. All of the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of making it. Plus, it's healthy for you. Cookie dough chunk puffs are only 160 calories and they have a whopping 15 grams of protein in them. Run to built.com to snag a box for your family. It will be the perfect treat, or you can find a really good hiding place and just hoard them for yourself. They send me boxes of those all the time, and I eat a couple of them. But if I'm going to be honest with you, the kids love them and they eat them before I do. They love them. We all love them. Like all Built Bars, the new cookie dough chunk puff is covered in 100% real chocolate. That means they're healthy and tasty. Chocolate covered cookie dough with a light, fluffy texture. So good. What's great about Built is all of their bars are made with a collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of healthy benefits. Eat something that tastes good and is good for you. You're going to love the new cookie dough chunk puff. Whether you need a snack for your workout, a late night treat, or just grab a quick bite, Built is the perfect protein bar, and they taste better than a candy bar. Ditch the calories, fat, and sugar. Grab yourself a Built bar. So go to built.com, use promo code LOCKEDON15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKEDON15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, where it's your team every day. In this episode, we are talking about the big deals that were made in the offseason. For the longest time, you heard these players that they would go out and they'd sign these mega deals, and it was usually a high dollar figure. But now players are looking for a little bit more than just money. They are looking for security. They want to go to a team and they want to know that they're going to be able to play there for some time. Now, not every player has that leverage to be able to get that. I mean, if you're a poor player, they're going to say, well, that's nice, but I'm signing you to a 1-year deal because you have to prove that you're worth it. But if you're in the caliber of a Nazem Kadri, or if you're a Johnny Gaudreau or a Line, someone like that, then you have a little bit of a bargaining room where you can say, hey, take a look at the back of my hockey card and see how good of a player I am. I think I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that, or I'm not going to play on your team. So just taking a look at some of the other big deals that were made is the Jonathan Huberdeau extension trade and sign with the Flames. And, I'm a bit on the fence on that deal. Um, if you think about it, Kachuk went down to Florida, and I think that that's going to help Florida. But that was a Florida team that wasn't that great to start out with. I know that they went to the playoffs and all of that, but just when I watched them on the ice, they weren't a stellar team. They weren't a team that was ready to go to the next level. And I think doing a thing like getting rid of Huberdeau and getting rid of Uyghur, I don't necessarily think it was a good idea. I do think that the Calgary Flames are going to look like the real winners in this one in the long term. That Calgary Flames team was a team that was kind of on the cusp for the longest time. If they can get consistent net minding, if they can get all of those new players to perform, then I think they're going to be in a really good position to do some really great things. So in this next one, we are going to talk about Huberdeau, a big name and a great player. I think that this is an A-plus move for the Calgary Flames. 8 years, $84 million, $10.5 million AAV. So just a crazy thing. 8 years, that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. Like they were talking about, it used to be like a 4-year deal was like this huge deal, but now we're 8 years. Again, I think that that is the price that you want to pay if you want to get these players. If you don't want to play ball, then they're just going to go somewhere else. You can trade away a unicorn player like Matthew Tkachuk without getting an absolute haul in return. And the return for Tkachuk did not disappoint, with Huberdeau, defenseman Mackenzie Weegar, center prospect Cole Schwint, and conditional first-round pick in the 2025 going to Calgary. It plugged some major holes, but the package would have been diminished if Huberdeau and or Weegar opted not to return after the season. But general manager Brad Treliving made a convincing pitch to the 29-year-old Huberdeau over dinner last week. Huberdeau, who is coming off a 115-point season, second in the league behind Connor McDavid's 123, said Treliving made him understand how much the club cares about him and having him pass this season. The trade itself set it up for Calgary for the short term, while the extension helps them in the long term. And a really solid move for the Flames. It seemed like Tkachuk had a bit of an attitude problem. So, I mean, if that's the case, then I say, I don't care what kind of player you are. move on. We don't need that kind of attitude in the locker room. And I think that, Huberdeau and Uyghur, I think that that is definitely going to help out the Flames. I think that, they were a team that was kind of on the cusp, but I think that that might push them over the top. It sure appears that way anyway. And like I say, sometimes that's what you have to do. You have to make these big deals if you want to take your team over the top. So Matthew Tkachuk extension trade signed with the Florida Panthers. 8 years, 76 million. Kachuk was headed towards salary arbitration with the Flames and had all of the leverage after informing the team he would not be signing a long-term contract. The loss of Goudreau, the line mate he saw the most success with, triggered the exit, and it seemed like he was on his way to his hometown of the St. Louis Blues. Instead, the Panthers pulled off one of the most exciting trades the NHL has seen in years, and Kachuk, an RFA, immediately signed a big extension. The 24-year-old brother of Ottawa Senators captain Brady Tkachuk is often referred to as the unicorn because of his rare blend of size, skill, speed, and physicality. He is a true power forward of the old school variety, but also brings dynamic scoring and playmaking abilities. His 62 assists were the 11th most of all skaters. Tkachuk is a win-now player on a win-now team. Let's hope this deal is the first of many like it. And, I hear his stats and I look at the back of his hockey card, and hey, it's his prerogative to go wherever he wants, but it just seems like, and I'm not totally plugged in with the Calgary scene. Of course, I cover the Capitals, but, I follow all of the teams in general. But is there something brewing out in Calgary that all these players want out? You take a look at Goudreau, and then you take a look at Kachuk. What is going on out in Calgary? It makes you wonder. It seems like they put a pretty good product out on the ice year after year. There must be something a little bit more to it than meets the eye. But hey, if these guys can go out and get these kind of contracts, then good for them. So the next player we're going to talk about is a familiar one, and it goes back to what I would consider the worst trade in Capitals history. And there was some speculation out there if Philip Forsberg was going to come back to his home. A Philip Forsberg extension with the Nashville Predators. 8 years, 68 million. Again, do you notice a common thread here? All these 8-year deals. This is probably market value for a player of Forsberg's caliber at his age. He had a massive season last year with 42 goals and 42 assists. When there was no extension by trade deadline, general manager David Poyle's decision to retain him instead of trade him was met with plenty of skepticism. If Forsberg had walked away during free agency, it would have been embarrassing, but his 8-year extension showed that he still believes that the team can contend soon. This exercise is also about grading the front office to a certain extent, and the Predators did not find this offseason, but they're likely still quite a few players away from really contending again. Trading Ryan McDonough should help in the front of goaltender Yari Saros, and free agent acquisition Nino Niederreiter will provide some offensive spark. Outside of Forsberg and Saros, the core of the roster is on the wrong side of 30 and will need to get younger in the coming years. It was important to retain Forsberg, though, and Poyle managed to lock him down. And it's, an aging roster. Where have we heard that one before? Maybe in Washington, maybe in Pittsburgh, maybe in Boston. It just seems to be one of the things that, a lot of these teams, they don't want to let go of their older players. And I don't blame them. Those are the players in most cases that are a proven commodity, and they got those teams to where they are. So I think to a certain extent, it's doing the safe thing and keeping those guys around. All right, so after the break, we are going to continue to talk about some of these mega deals, and not necessarily mega in terms of money, but a lot of money, but mega in the form of how long they are or the term of the contract. We'll talk about those next. Hello, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, where it's your team every day. In this episode, we are talking about some of the mega deals out there, not necessarily mega deals in the form of dollar amount, but for term and how long they were signed for. And the Washington Capitals were no stranger to that either, where they went out and signed the biggest name goalie on the market in free agency, Darcy Kemper. A lot of people out there said that would never happen, that Darcy Kemper would come to the Washington Capitals. Why would he want to come to the Capitals? And I'm not really sure why people say that. I mean, the Capitals are always going to the playoffs. They won the Stanley Cup in 2018. But in any case, the Washington Capitals signed Darcy Kemper to a 5-year, $26.25 million contract. That contract will ostensibly be through the remainder of Alex Ovechkin's career in Washington. And I think that sent certain messages out there that that the Washington Capitals wanted to make sure that they didn't have another situation like they had the last couple of years with Samsonov and Vanacek. We only have so many years left with Alex Ovechkin in the Rock the Red era on the Washington Capitals. Let's make sure that net minding isn't going to be our Achilles heel. And I think that, what Brian McClellan did is he went out there and he swung for the fences and he got the biggest name goaltender on the market. Kemper was one of the rare players to lose value during the Stanley Cup final after some shaky goaltending in the Avs title run. He posted a .902 save percentage in the postseason, letting in some low dangers and few downright bad goals. Colorado decided to move on in favor of a tandem of Pavel Francouz and Alexander Georgiev, even though Georgiev is somewhat of a reclamation project right now. And I kind of like Georgiev. He was one of the netminders that I talked about months ago that I could see him coming to the Washington Capitals. But it seems to be Shesterkin's net in New York, so I can see why New York wanted to move on. And I can also see why Colorado wanted to have his services. But the goaltending market worked out in Kemper's favor, and he ended up with the Capitals, who needed better goaltending to stay relevant in their quest to extend their window of contention. Washington was linked to the 6'5", 32-year-old after they traded Vitek Vanacek to the New Jersey Devils on the second day of the draft. It makes sense, and it's a good fit, but if Kemper can get back to the level of play he displayed with the Arizona Coyotes, it would be an even better fit. And, that's some of the things out there. And I know that it's easy to get caught up in some of the lights and the glimmer of everything. And I have nothing but a positive attitude about Darcy Kemper going forward. But is, like the article talked about, and I've talked about to a certain extent, an unproven commodity. I know that, he has the Stanley Cup goaltender feather that he can wear in his hat. And I hope that is the goaltender that we have on the Washington Capitals in the years to come. But like they talked about in that article, a bit of an unproven commodity. I ultimately think that, Brian McClellan did everything that he could do. I'm not going to throw shade in his direction. He did everything he could do. I mean, if you go and you sign a Stanley Cup winning netminder, and you still get grief, then I mean that person that is being disparaging should look in a different direction, because I think that Brian McClellan did what he could do, and he went out and he swung for the fences and got the biggest goalie on the free agent market. I don't think that anyone can ask for anything more than that. And I think, between the Darcy Kemper and Charlie Lindgren tandem, I think this Washington Capitals team is in an excellent position heading into next year in the netminding department. Thank you for making Locked On Capitals your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On NHL. Locked On Experts give you a daily 30-minute podcast on all things NHL all year long. Stay up to date on everything in the hockey world. Locked On NHL, your daily 30-minute NHL podcast. So once again, thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals as we head through these summer months. Training camp is fast approaching, and we'll have all kinds of news, and I think it's going to be a most interesting training camp. I think there's going to be a lot of young players fighting for those positions that are available, but it will be exciting, suffices to say. All right, once again, thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, and I'll talk to you next time.